Hello and welcome to the Miraculous Being series. I'm your host and self awareness coach, Shweta Shivraman, and this is a show where we discover, learn, and implement lessons from others' life journeys. Others who I believe epitomize miraculous in its truest spirit. Individuals who live life to the fullest, who worked hard on themselves to reach where they are, and are passionate in what they do. Today, we have a very special guest coming on, and she is none other than Anushka Sani. Anushka is the founder and creative director at Thought Over Design, a studio that specializes in brand strategy and design for consumer brands across industries. She was also recently appointed as a chief creative advisor at the Whole Truth Foods. She works closely with entrepreneurs and leaders to translate their business vision into brands that create an impact and tell enduring stories in the fluid world of consumer brands in India. And today we are going to be talking about creativity and entrepreneurship. I'm already super excited for this show. So let's dive in. Hi, Anushka. So nice to have you on the Miraculous Being show. Thank you for making time today.
Well, thank you for inviting me on this show, Shweta. I really like what you've been doing, and I'm glad to have this conversation with you.
Yes, me too. And sorry. Yes. I think when I saw your profile and the kind of work that you've been doing, and thanks to you, I got to see the Creative Mornings talk as well. And I have to say, so inspired. And I know I have so many questions in my head buzzing, but we'll start probably with a very unconventional approach, which I thought usually when people step into entrepreneurship, you get an idea and you're buzzing with ideas and you're like jumping into it immediately. But in your case, I think when you started your journey, you said that you actually took a break, took a step back before you decided to jump in. So just very curious in terms of what prompted that step back.
Yeah. So, Shweta, I had been working for a few years before I decided to take the break. It wasn't very long, but I started working immediately after I finished, college. And there was not really too much of a break that I'd had. So I'd done my course in BMM, after which I got into Srishti, which is a school in Bangalore for, design. And straight after that, I jumped into my first job. And about 2 years into the job, I sort of decided to take this break. So the reason really for that was, about a year and a half into the workplace, I started having some questions, about what is it that I wanted to do, whether the work I was doing was fulfilling. And to be honest, the job that I had was a phenomenal experience for the first time. I couldn't have asked for anything better. I was given a lot of freedom, a lot of opportunity. But my personality is such that when I get an opportunity like that, I tend to delve deep into it, and I kind of burnt myself out. And what ended up happening is I was working very long hours, and I kind of just realized that I had reached a a very difficult point in my own personal mental health, journey and things like that. And I decided that a little bit of a break would be nice. Um, the break, however, was not a complete break per se. I'm not someone who can just take time off and, read a book, for example. I get really distracted. I have a lot of energy that I need to expend. So the break was actually inspired by a trip that I had taken to the Andaman Islands a year prior. And I fell in love with the place, and I saw a lot of people doing very different work from what I had imagined, people to be doing: dive masters, dive instructors, people running a dive shop, or, something like that. And I just thought to myself, what if I could spend some time living an alternate reality? So that was really what inspired it. And I had no idea that I was going to start something of my own after either. So the break wasn't to sort of say that, hey, let me take a break before I do this. The break was just for myself and to take a moment to sort of do something different in life and to just explore something completely out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love how you said that, it's so important to recognize and be aware of what our personality types are also before we
Yeah.
do it, instead of just saying that we'll go Bollywood style and do breaks like that. But I think very interesting what stood out for me is that it wasn't with an intention of finding the next hustle or, finding the next job or where to next. So very curious, how was that experience for you where you did not really have an intention of
Yeah.
something to get out, which is so natural
Yeah.
in our generation.
Yeah. So, I was hoping that the outcome would be that I would actually, convert that into some kind of professional interest, that I would become a dive instructor and actually move to the Andamans and live there long term. I did a short stint there. I did something called a dive master program, and I did about 4.5 months over there. But what ended up happening is, the monsoon hit, I came back, and it was a really, really tough time for me, actually. My friends thought, oh, Anushka's just gone on this fabulous break. She's going to come back super excited. But really, what ended up happening was that I started feeling a complete shift in energy, when you come from a space which is very different, living on an island, having a different routine, waking up at 5 in the morning, doing a lot of physical, strenuous work, and then sort of having your day end by 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. It's a very different routine from living in a big city. So I came back and actually didn't know what I was going to do next because I had no idea. And it was a very difficult time to face that um, sense of not knowing, I would say that it was probably one of the toughest times in my life. You could say it was an extreme high with the break, followed by a low point where, I was confused. Do I want to study more? Do I want to get a job? Do I want to maybe try and do my own thing? My father was exploring some creative pursuits at the time. I was kind of trying to help him with that, and quickly realized father-daughter working relationship is very different from the father-daughter mentor relationship. So it was a tough time, and I think it really pushed me to make some difficult choices as well, because um when you don't necessarily have an outcome at the end of a break, you are then forced to make decisions based on reality. Correct. And my reality was that, I needed to find something to do. Like I said, I'm a very hyper person, and not having a job to go to in the morning or not having a packed calendar um, was a great source of like concern for both myself and my parents. In fact, one or two of my friends also had a chat with me saying, Anushka, this is very unlike you. Like, do you want to get your shit together or what? So that really kind of motivated me to take the next steps. And I was lucky, I will also say that. A few people in my network knew that I was kind of in between things. And as it happened, so they reached out to me to do some projects with them. So I was very fortunate to be in a position where people reached out to me for work that I then made my full-time pursuit. So I started taking on work as a freelancer, and got completely busy with that, entire process.
Thank you for sharing that so honestly. I think in our day of Instagram reels, we don't really see what actually happens behind, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you for
yeah,
sharing that, honestly. And from that to 10 years of
yeah,
being an entrepreneur, right? So from
yeah,
starting it as a freelance hustle to 10 years, how has that journey been for you?
yeah. It's been a ride, to be honest. Everyone says it, and I think it sounds like a cliche, but that's really what it is. I had no clue what entrepreneurship was. I never studied business. I didn't, like, a lot of my friends went to business school. They studied entrepreneurship. They learned things about leadership, about financial planning, about building a team, about, being a leader of a certain kind. I didn't know any of this. So it has been learning on the job completely. It has been sort of a very humbling process as well. You get into it with a certain kind of gusto, and there are things that humble you across every point of that journey. So I would definitely call it a roller coaster ride. And, even though I'm at the other end of 10 years, I have to keep reminding myself that, look, when you look back at just 1 week or 2 weeks or 1 month, you don't feel like you've made much progress, and it does feel like sometimes you're stuck. But when you look at the entire 10 years as as one big chunk, that's when you can see that the little progress you've been making has enabled you to make a lot of progress towards the end. So I don't think sitting here either I can say that, wow, it's like I've arrived, or like I've done everything I meant to do, or I've achieved my goals. I think the goalposts keep moving. And I think the idea is to just acknowledge that over a period of time there is growth and learning that you can take from. So the biggest one for me has just been that I've had to trust myself and my gut a lot. So initially it would be hey, this is a gut feeling, but is it the right decision, etc. I think the last 10 years have taught me that that gut feeling is so critical in the process that I need to really, really trust it. Because whenever I've gone against my gut, whether it was in year one or in year 10, I've regretted it. So I think that's the one big learning. I think just tune yourself a little bit to your gut. At least for me, that's been a key learning.
Yeah, and a super hard thing when we live in such a noisy world,
Yes.
constantly getting opinions from others. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
being attuned to your gut. All right. And
Yeah.
I love the perspective that you shared that, while you don't feel like you're making progress on a day on day or a week on week or a month on month basis, a decade, and you suddenly feel
Yeah.
like so much has changed, right?
Yeah.
And now, if you were to really retrospect, right, will you be able to, walk us through maybe a couple of pivotal points which really shaped who you are or, what you're doing today?
Uh, you know, sure. I think for me, all the pivotal points have been, transformative for me as an entrepreneur and personally. So I think the first one was really sort of taking a bet on doing this. So like I said, I hadn't decided to start. I started off as a freelancer, and the work I was getting was as a freelance designer. But all the projects that I was sort of getting my way started to kind of bleed into more work, and I was finding it difficult to kind of manage on my own. So the first pivotal point was deciding that I need to have a full-time employee that I would pay a salary to. So up until then, I had worked with a couple of other freelancers, and I said, hey, help me with this part of the project, help me with this part of the project. But just kind of making that decision that, okay, I'm doing this. I have to actually bring someone on board, make a contract for them, have them sign it, because I always have wanted to do things very by the book. I'm that kind of person. But that moment for me of bringing one person on board full time was a very big deal. I think the second pivotal point was, getting our first space. It was the smallest little space. It was actually a sublet room in another, friend's dad's office. And we just needed space for 3 computers. That's it. And even that was such a big decision. I remember thinking about it for like 2 months. Will I be able to afford this? Will I be able to do this? And those were very pivotal in the early days of starting out. Over time, I think there have been a couple of other milestones that have happened. So I think one thing a lot of designers will agree on is when you work with clients, there are some that are so giving with their feedback to you, with their they kind of go out to the world and tell everyone that they've worked with you, and that you enabled that work to happen. It's rare actually because especially in my career, it's been sort of not that often that people kind of want to give complete credit. So one of the things that was very pivotal for me was when clients started talking to other people about the work that we did, and telling other people that, okay, this is the work that thought of a design has done. And we didn't have to ask them to do that. Can you write us a review? Can you give us a testimonial? And one thing I remember is I was kind of like in 2019, I had started working with Shashank Mehta from the Whole Truth Foods. And he was really nice. And we did a little, in 2020, we did a little, I don't know what we call a live, an Instagram live, where we spoke about the project and things like that. And he very openly spoke about the contribution we made to the project. And for me, that was a very pivotal moment as well, because someone is not just trusting us in the process, but they're also kind of giving credit where it's due. And so many people sort of learned about us from that. And I'm so grateful, for that relationship and what it brought to the project as well as, the studio by and large. Um, I think another pivotal point was the pandemic. it was a stage where we were very small when we started. When the pandemic started, we were about 8, 9 people at the studio. And it was really scary because we had to start working from home. And I had no experience in working from home because I never believed in the concept of work from home or working remotely or like, doing things um, on Zoom like we are right now. And it was just a momentary decision, like just a week before the lockdown. And I said, listen, everyone, just take your IMAX home and we're going to do this from home, regardless of what other places decide. Let's just be safe, right? And what happened in the pandemic is it forced us to create new processes. It forced us to kind of collaborate with a lot of trust. It forced us to kind of do things very differently. And it allowed us to, in fact, grow as opposed to stay in the same place. So the studio was a certain size and scale till that point, and actually the pandemic helped us grow from 7 to 8 people to now 20 people. So I think that was a very pivotal point in my growth as an entrepreneur as well.
Yeah. What a beautiful journey. Thank you so much for walking us through that. But like you probably said, this wasn't all rosy or easy as it
No.
looks like, right? So, did you ever face any challenges, personal, internal, external? How did you navigate them?
Yeah. The challenges have been there since the get-go. And I've always sort of taken my time to sort of learn from that experience before moving on to the next thing. So I think one of the things I learned very early on is that people will leave. And I think when you're building a team and when you have so much love for the team that you've built, you feel that this is going to be forever. And it's been a journey of tough love, this one, because people you feel would never leave sometimes do, and you just need to make peace with that. So what I realized early on was that, look, if people are going to anyway kind of, you know, go on, etc., how do we make the time they spend with us, fruitful? How do we make it really great for them so that they only have good experiences to take from their time with us? And similarly, like, when they move on, how can we enable their journey as they move on into the world? Can we help them with their next, stint? Can we be a mentor to them as they move along in their career path and things like that? So that was a learning that happened very early on, and a couple of people left me when I was like not prepared for it, I feel. And it also taught me to make better contracts. It taught me to have clearer conversations with people in terms of what their roles are and things like that. It taught me to be much clearer in terms of what I expect versus what I don't from a certain role. So I think that's definitely one big learning, and it's been happening through the years as well. Um, the second thing is, I would say, just patience. It's really really hard to run a creative business in India. There are no I don't think there's a formula for it. When I started out, there weren't enough people talking about what went into it either. So there was very little guidance and things like that available. I have a few people who've been very kind in my network, and in with family, that have been so kind to help me. My uncle Sunil Lulla, he has a great experience with agencies and the media world, and he's always been mentoring me and giving me advice through the years. There's Lulu Raghavan from Landor, who's kind of sent clients to us time and time again, and that support has been so pivotal. So the thing is, I've realized also it's helpful to lean on people, and to kind of get the help that's needed. So one of the pieces of advice I got when I was early on in my career was just pick up the phone and ask people stuff. So when you're stuck somewhere, just pick up the phone and ask. And if they don't want to tell you, they'll kind of skirt around the conversation. But if they really want to help you, they will. And more often than not, people have been very helpful and kind, in that process. But it's hard to reach the point where you're like, okay, I need to have the courage to do this. I need to have the courage to say, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me in doing this? And also just ask people, and be okay to kind of also not get an answer. And I think that is something that I've kind of learned over time. Um, I've also sort of dealt with my own personal challenges. I for many, many years dealt with anxiety, in a very large way. And there were some personal things in my life that kind of led to me feeling a lot of anxiety, and that affects your professional life. You know, that definitely affects how you show up to work every day, what kind of person you are, what kind of leader you are, and things like that. And I was very hyper aware of these things. So I've always kind of, looked at therapy and healing as an option to help me just kind of be stable. And even if that's a place to sort of vent or to sort of share what's going on in my life with friends or therapists or people who've kind of been through this as well, it's been very cathartic in that sense, because I feel like if I bottle it up, I'm not the kind of person who can deal with it too well. It explodes into further things. So I've kind of started with my journey with a little bit of crystal healing and Bach flower healers. I then went to someone who's a hypnotherapist and kind of gone deep into that as well. Um, More recently, I tried something called craniosacral therapy as well. So I've kind of dabbled with different modes of therapy over the last 15 years. And it's been very important for me to do that, just to find new tools and methodologies to kind of deal with what I'm going through, either emotionally or intellectually as well. Sometimes it's just helpful to have someone explain, this is what's going on right now, like, with an emotion, like a graph or something like that. And you're like, okay, yeah, actually, I'm at this low point and maybe I need to kind of fix that. So there's been those tools that have helped me a lot, not just in my personal life, but in my professional life also, because they kind of do get blurred, right? So yeah, I think that's just a little bit on that.
Thank you for sharing. So tough love, patience, picking up the phone and asking for help, and not being afraid to ask for help even personally, right? And I think this is
Yeah.
something we really touched upon. And thank you for sharing that anxiety, because we often misconstrue that if certain things are okay in the external world, the internal world is automatically balanced, right? But not necessarily, because we are humans and we keep fluctuating, even if we might have the clarity and the awareness. So very curious, since you touched upon anxiety, so obviously that one is seeking out therapy and other kinds of help. Anything else that is there in your toolkit which could help someone who's listening in and probably is still
Yeah.
struggling with anxiety?
The biggest learning for me is when I suffered a very bad health issues a couple of years ago. Um, and I realized I had to get fit, you know, physically fit. Um, you know, One of the things that I started doing was weight training and just exercising. And Shweta, I can't tell you how much that's helped. So you think that a problem can only be solved in one way. So in my case, for years, it was different kinds of therapy and different kinds of ways of understanding my own mind. But sometimes a problem can be tackled by, uh, you know, physically doing something different. So I think the body has a tremendous ability to release certain hormones and things like that. And I think exercising has been a game changer for me. Ever since I started doing that, actually, um, luckily for me, I can't speak for anyone else, of course, but for me, I've had to reduce the number of sessions of therapy that I need to do, in the year. I feel like I'm able to manage my day better. I feel I'm able to manage my emotions better, and things like that. So definitely, that's one tool that has helped. And I wouldn't say I got to that path because people used to tell me, oh, if you exercise, you'll feel better and you'll do better. But actually, when I reached a point where, my back gave way, I had a lot of health issues, that's when I was forced to get fit. That's when I realized that getting fit is not just good for my physical health and appearance, it's also good for my mental health. So that is a big one and a big learning because it has really changed the way I deal with things. Um, it's also really important for me as a person to have a safe space of people to discuss things with. So whether it's key people on my team that I confide in on things that I'm thinking about, and having very open and transparent discussions with them. That's super helpful as well. Our culture at, Thought of a Design is super open. Even if I'm having a bad day, I'll just communicate it to everyone that, guys, I'm having a bad day. So just deal with it if I go sideways a little bit, because I feel like a little out of my own depth right now. And that's been really helpful because, a lot of young people today and people in our team, they get it, and then I see they communicate it when they're having a bad day as well. So I think that transparency and that safe space is really important. And I have that safe space that I've created for myself with my team, with my family, and with a lot of friends, that I have as well. So I think this has become a very open conversation today. There's nothing wrong with, talking about the fact that you have, certain things that you're dealing with. And I think people are very open to being a good listener as well, if not giving advice, right? So I think that's been helpful also.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. We had someone on the show a couple of weeks ago who was actually talking about mental health. She does mental health advocacy, and she was like, when you don't ask your friends for help, you're doing them grave injustice.
Yeah,
For all they might actually want to just be there for you, right?
yeah, yeah,
So thank you for
yeah,
sharing that. It kind of
yeah,
connected the dots from there. And the other thing, so a lot of us, this podcast I say is for a lot of high achievers, and one of the most common things that is there in terms of mental health issues for high achievers is imposter syndrome, right? Constantly feeling like you're a fraud or you don't belong or that you're going to be found out somewhere, something, right? And just curious, have you ever experienced it? How have you learned to navigate it, especially in your field where there's so much creativity also involved in it?
yeah. I feel it a lot of times, actually. You mentioned the creative morning talk, and Amishi, this wonderful girl who kind of coordinates the community and puts the talks together, had told me, yeah, there'll be like 30, 40 people or something like that. So that's what I was expecting. And when we got there, there were like close to 100 people, and that was really scary for me because I was like, what is going on? And it was surprising to me that so many people wanted to hear me speak, and things like that. And while I don't feel nervous to speak, I think just um, the thought of this, oh, now this bigger audience being there made me feel like, okay, am I prepared for this kind of a platform? Am I prepared for this kind of a talk? And then you just kind of kick yourself and you're like, hey, you got this, and then you go with the flow then. But I think overall, I would be lying if I said I had a tool to manage it or deal with it. Um, Someone told me something interesting, which is, whenever you feel this way, you should just look at how far you've come from where you were. And that's a good marker. And I think that's what I do when I feel that way. I'm just like, okay, would Anushka from 10 years ago uh, be proud of you? And if that's the case, then, you're good. So I just have to keep reminding myself of that. But there's no specific tool. I feel the imposter syndrome is also helpful sometimes, because it kind of puts you in your place, and it reminds you of the fact that at the end of the day, like, none of us is such a big deal. So I don't know if I associate myself with a high achiever, but I do know that I stress myself out a lot, and I don't give myself enough credit for the work I've done. But even when we've achieved something, at the end of the day, it's the other things that matter. It's the time you create for other things in your life, the relationships, and all of those things. So I feel like the imposter syndrome is a nice reminder that we're actually not that big a deal, and it's nice. It's like, okay, yeah, this is who I am. It's fine.
Such a refreshing perspective. Yeah. And I mean, I think for me, at least, whenever I'm stressed out, the beautiful thing of just like, zooming out and saying what a tiny human you are in the macrocosm of the
Yeah,
universe kind of helps, because you're like, hey, this is not that big a deal, because we zoom in and become so
yeah,
myopic about whatever problem we are in.
yeah,
But just stepping back and looking at ourselves and saying, okay, it's not that big a deal. Right. And I
yeah,
love the
yeah,
perspective of thinking of whether 10 years ago, the person
yeah,
you were would be proud of where we are today. Such a Beautiful way to
Yeah.
look at it.
That's actually a tool my therapist, I think, shared with me in one of my sessions. So that was helpful.
Right, right. And probably another common thing that most of us, that I see in terms of, even my coaching clients, when we're very ambitious and we're very driven,
Yeah.
we also don't know when to pause. We don't know when to take a break. We don't, we kind of don't do the battery recharging when the battery recharging has to happen. We wait till we conk off and then have to find a way back. So I know you mentioned burned out once in your journey as well, but curious, have you had episodes with burnout? What helps you find your way back? How do you deal with it?
Yeah. Man, I've had so many since then. I haven't figured it out just yet, to be very honest. There are phases where it's really, really tough. In fact, even the last couple of months we were trying to connect for the podcast, and it's taken a while. It's because it's just been crazy. And I feel like the only way to kind of do it is to get through it sometimes. Like just kind of push through it, and then there are some days that just work out beautifully, and you feel like, okay, fine, it was worth it. So there's that, and sometimes it's good to just be like, I am taking a break. That's it. So I have these planned breaks that I go on. I travel quite a bit. Um, According to my clients, I travel a lot, but I travel a little bit, at least 3, 4 times a year, because I find that when I'm here, when I'm in Bombay, I can't cut off. I can't cut off from the team. I can't cut off from my work. Maybe one day in the weekend, 1.5 days in the weekend, I can. But otherwise, people are like, oh, just take 2 days off and chill at home and take your time. I can't do it. Something about the city, something about the energy here doesn't allow me to do it. So for me, it's really important to change the space. It's important to even go for 2 days somewhere else, and to cut off, or to go to a place like I go on my dive trips and I have no network, so that's really nice as well. Um, for me, the change of space is really important for that recharge to happen, and I make it a point to do it a few times a year, because when I'm here, it's uh, you know, like you said, like everything looks good on Instagram. People are like, oh, everything's going well, but man, from like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., you're just like back to back. You don't know where the day has gone. So it can get very, very tiring.
I'm sure. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it is. And I think it's a continuous journey of discovering, right? I think we go a little too much and then we're like, okay, we need to push back a bit. And it's
Yeah,
like constantly iterating, saying where that end zone is so that you kind of stop yourself from falling off the cliff as much as you can. Yeah.
yeah. Shweta, what's also helpful is, I think for me at least, is having a solid support system.
Mm.
So, because you can't always escape, right? So again, it comes back to the point on the safe space. So I know I can confide in my team and tell them, I'm feeling super burnt out right now. I need a day to just, ease up the meetings and things like that. And my team is so awesome. They kind of help me do that. Or whether it's with family, I often call up my dad and vent to him, and he'll give me some advice, and that's helpful as well. What's been really, really helpful is having a group of friends, also entrepreneurs, and women doing amazing things in their own regard, and everyone is kind of having their own struggles. So when you speak to other people, it helps you with your own challenges as well, and you're not alone
Yeah.
in this. So that's another way of dealing with it. Just kind of knowing you have company, like we're all in this like crazy stage of life together, and then that's helpful sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. True. I think in this world of digital media, we forget the real connections and how much, they matter in terms of helping us
Yeah,
through the
yeah.
journey. Yeah.
For me, it's those that are very critical, very, very critical. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I really wanted to touch upon with you was that in your case, it's not just entrepreneurship, but also being creative
Yeah.
in the process, right? To me, that feels like a double whammy because like I can choose coaching or when I'm doing my creative writing work, I can sort of slow that down and fuse this up and do balancing. But I guess in your case, it is both, right? That you need to
Yeah,
fuel your creativity as well
yeah,
while you're managing your business. And just curious, how has that been for you, and how do you create that balance for yourself?
yeah. I don't know one without the other anymore. I have to be honest
Yeah.
because I just started my business, and even when I had started my first job, it was a lot of switching of context,
Mm.
a lot of switching from a business conversation to an accounting conversation to a client conversation to a creative brief to designing something to dealing with uh, a brief you're not fully understanding or trying to grapple your head around or finding an insight. So it's constant switching of context. I feel the more you do it, the more you're able to do it. It's kind of like getting used to it. Um, but I will say that, even till date, I do face this challenge sometimes where I'm unable to be creative, because it's just been, I've looked at the P&L statement, I've understood, okay, which invoices are pending. I've kind of done a couple of maybe I've looked at 50 designer profiles and I'm looking to hire one. I've had a conversation with two recruitment companies and it's all of that stuff. And then suddenly you have like an hour where you need to be creative and you realize you just can't sometimes. So then you just be honest. Or, I'm honest with my team as well. Guys, like right now, I've reached the end of my day with this one. I'm going to look at it tomorrow morning. But what it does is, as that keeps happening, you just keep having to force yourself to deliver in that in that window as well. So, like I said, I don't know one from the other, but for sure, sometimes I feel like I don't want to do any of this admin work kind of today. So can I just cancel these things and sit with the creative team and do some stuff? So it's also nice to sort of be able to choose and pick. Because to be very honest, I think I enjoy both, at the end of the day. I do enjoy both. So I try to remind myself I'm fortunate to be in a position where I can do both.
Yeah, true. And if I were to maybe ask you this, saying that what are some practices that you have on a daily
Mm,
basis or a regular basis that help
yeah,
you fuel this creativity? What would that be like?
yeah. Um, I wouldn't call it fueling the creativity, but I would just say that I'm a person who loves my routine.
Mm.
I'm a very routine oriented person. So, in fact, at times when things go really nuts at work and I lose my routine, I hate it. I really don't like it. But I like having my morning routine where I wake up, I work out, I spend some time just sort of by myself having breakfast and, catching up with maybe one friend in the morning or something like that, doing some reading, with the news or anything that's going on. I enjoy that in the morning. And then when I get into work, my entire day is planned in advance. What are my meetings? What am I doing? And then there's always 1 hour I keep free in the day to kind of do ad hoc things that are happening. And in the evening, potentially, if it's a very long day, I just go home and spend time by myself, or I meet some friends or family, and that helps me decompress, really. And having that routine is very important. And then on the weekend, I just don't work. I try not to work, like not active work. Of course, when you run a business, you're never not working. So it's kind of like always conversations, meetings, stuff like that happen. And you're kind of thinking of stuff at the back of your head, but you're not actively working. So I really try to do that as well. So for me, that routine, that sense of mundane, that's really nice. I don't know if that makes sense. So I like that. And in fact, now earlier this year, I was traveling quite a bit. I traveled once in Jan, then I traveled once in March, and then I traveled in May. And then I kind of came back and I was like, I am just so done right now. I don't want to go anywhere. Like, unless it's for a project or for client work, I want to come back and fix my routine because even fixing my routine takes time. Getting back in the groove with a certain workout takes a bit of time. Getting used to eating a certain way uh, takes a bit of time. One of the practices that I have been unable to adopt is meditation. and I have really been wanting to do that. It sounds like the perfect fix for a lot of issues I have, but I haven't been able to do it yet. So I have to be honest that it's been on my mind every day, but I have not been able to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful. We'll catch up on the meditation part later. I
Yes.
That's my morning routine. I can't do without it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think even I'm one of those people where, routines are boring, but to me, they give me freedom because when my morning is set and my unwind is set, in between, I have just so much energy available to tend
Yeah.
to what
Yeah.
needs to get done, right? Beautiful.
Totally. Totally.
And I know we can keep going on, but I'll ask you one last question before we jump into the rapid fire. I think when we were speaking initially, there was this very interesting aspect that you brought in about scaling up and slowing down.
Mm. Mm.
I would love to hear your perspective around that because as an entrepreneur, somewhere we have that wiring of hustling and keeping our chase on for the next milestone. If it's like this much square feet of office space, you want a bigger one, a more bigger seater one, and the chase is endless, right? So, how do you see the two of them playing out?
Yeah. So, with this particular topic, I just feel in my context it works. I don't know if it works with other people. But we do something very specific, right? Because our work is pretty specific, the kind of services we offer and things like that. And we exist in a world where clients want the sun, moon, and earth from you. So as a design studio, the opportunity to scale to doing other things is tenfold. You can get into production, you can get into PR, you can get into advertising, you can get into media, you can get into social media, you can get into influencer marketing. And one would think that's awesome. Build a group of companies and do that. But being a designer at heart, and that's what I studied and that's where I come from, I enjoy doing the part of the craft that's intense, and it's kind of like some of the deep work happens there. And we kind of stick to our lane a little bit in terms of what we do because we feel that we really want to get very good at what we do, and we want to do it in the best way possible. So whenever someone is thinking of this particular thing that they need, they come to us. Now, of course, to support that, there are other things you may need to kind of adapt and kind of grow into, which we've done. um but largely I've never been kind of interested in the idea of just scaling because there's a business opportunity. Now, that's the reason I said this works for someone like me. I'm not trying to go IPO. I'm not trying to like please an investor. I don't have that set up. I've bootstrapped this business. For me, what's really precious to me is being able to select the clients and projects we work on, being able to really deliver a quality product for the few projects that we decided to work on. Being able to work with people that make me happy, coming into the office every morning and feeling like, okay, this is the team that I've built, and I'm so proud of this team that I've built, and I'm happy to be here. So those are things that are, for me, markers of doing well. And so if you have your own markers of doing well, then the scale conversation is about, is that a marker for you to do well? If that is a marker, then that's great. Own that and go for it. But it's not my marker, so to speak. That said, we have grown a little bit in the last few years, like I mentioned, right? We were 7, 8 people, now we're 20 people. The stress is more as a result of that. Um, but typically, to do good work, you don't need that many people. And when there's a bigger project, you can always involve people who are freelance and doing other things, and you can scale up the competence on the project for the time being, and then go back to the leanness of it. Um, for me, that's just the way I look at it, and I think that people kind of look at scale as the marker for success. And even some people have told me in the past, oh, how come you've not grown the agency? And I'm like, it's just not what I want to do. I want to kind of do this, and I want to do it well, and I want to do few things, and I want to work with few clients and few people, and just keep kind of doing that better you know and that's enough for me, at least right now. Maybe that'll change in the future, So, um, yeah, I just feel that there's different perspectives to things, and there are a couple of studios and agencies in the world that I look up to that are not that big either, and so I feel like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah. In Being Miraculous, we talk a lot about being intentional, right, in your choices. And what you shared sounded so much around
Mm.
that theme about really being conscious of saying, what is it that you want to pursue? And,
Yeah.
just owning that and, pursuing excellence there, right? I
Yes.
think there's just so much
Yes.
fulfillment. We don't all have to be that X billion brand or whatever it is, IPO, and, the chartered path that most people believe is success, right? I think
Yeah.
somewhere in our generation, we've forgotten success is subjective. It's not some objective, we
Yeah.
have.
Yeah. And we get joy sometimes out of seeing a lot of the clients we work with do go IPO, and they become big in their own right. And we have so much joy in seeing that we were a small part of that journey, you
Yeah,
know. So it's just kind of the story you tell yourself and how you want to live your life, I suppose.
true, true. And I think our narratives rule our worlds, right? So whatever we tell
Yeah.
makes the whole difference.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So Anushka, are you ready for our rapid fire? All right. We'll start with the easy ones. Morning
Okay.
person or night owl?
More recently, I've become a morning person,
Okay. Always on time or running behind schedule slightly?
running behind schedule slightly.
Books, movies, podcast, preferred way of consumption.
Instagram scrolling nowadays, and then movies.
And then movies. Okay. Anything that comes top of mind, recall as a movie that has moved you, touched you, something that you keep going back to?
Yeah, I love this movie that was made on the Beatles songs. It's called Across the Universe. One of my favorite movies of all time. It's a beautiful kind of take on all their songs, and they've weaved it into a musical themed film. It's not very popular, but I just love that film. It's really wonderful. Another one I love is The Pianist. It's based on the World War II, and it's a really moving film with Adrian Brody. Really enjoy that as well.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Non-negotiables in your routine.
Non-negotiables in my routine. Exercise at least 3 times a week, if not more than that. Um, Coming into work with discipline, 5 days a week, unless it's a bank holiday. Absolutely no bunk days and things like that. Um, Meeting family once a week, absolutely a must as well. And I think the last thing is just sort of like I said earlier, a little bit of therapy, but that's not every week. That's maybe once a month or something like
Mm. All right. One thing you wish your younger self knew.
that. That if you sit incorrectly, you will fuck up your back.
Oh gosh, yeah. I think
Okay.
we
And
all.
as a designer, we used to sit like this and work, you
Mm,
know.
mm,
So I had a lot of back issues because I would sit incorrectly and I would just walk incorrectly. And I just wish I knew better. Maybe I did know, people were telling me, but I didn't listen. But it caused me a lot of stress in my adult life. You know, I couldn't exercise for 4 years because of it.
mm. Yeah. Oof.
Just sit correctly. Google it.
I think then we have deeper appreciation for our bodies right now that when we are able to exercise and do all
Yeah,
of those things. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Uh, One word to describe the pandemic for you.
Transformation.
Mm, okay. And if you were to define what your best version looks like, what would that be?
Um, Someone who is healthy first, and someone who can give themselves credit for the things that they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And one takeaway you wish listeners from this podcast walk away with, what would that be?
That it's not always your personal life or your professional life, but these things kind of they kind of interact with each other at a very deep level. And if you work on yourself as a person, it'll influence the person you are at work. And you should also kind of realize that the person you are at work sometimes influences who you are as a person. So just be aware of all these things. And I personally, I know people who are like, "Oh, this is my work self and this is my chill self," and I don't understand that. I'm the same person in both places. Um, but I think that's very important. Just acknowledge it, and therefore, when you spend time on yourself, you're actually becoming better at work also. So that's the takeaway.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Anushka, for spending your time with us. I'm sure this episode is going to be so valuable. I enjoyed the 1 hour speaking with you. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Shweta. I really appreciate you having me over here.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.